Hello, and we're reading from No Right to an Honest Living by Jacqueline Jones. And I know I'm behind on my reading, but I'm reading a lot. There's so many interesting books, and there's so much I want to archive, I want to share. Together with Norfolk's Fountain, Boston's Austin Beers was one of only a handful of ship captains determined to transport enslaved people from the South to the North. He ran a packet between Boston and Virginia from the summer through the fall, and then some years went coasting to South Carolina and Georgia during the winter months. He worked with the BBC, which at times enlisted a black woman to sell pies and fruit to the crew of a vessel anchored in Boston Harbor. She would report back about whether stowaways were on board, and if so, under the cover of darkness, committee members rowed out to ships, spirited men and women off sloops, barks, and steamers. Those rescued first needed a change of clothing, the men perhaps a fishing suit to replace the slave dress of tow cloth. Some heeded advice and found a position on a fishing vessel or went a whaling, a voyage that might last several years. That's good because you're out of here for years. Unremitting toil was the hallmark of enslavement, and fugitives and migrants generally understood that wage earning represented the next and necessary step on the way to safety and independence in the North. Baltimore's William Howard noted, "I expected to work for a living, go where I would, and I could not be stopped from working." Many men and women who departed from a southern port and had the cash to pay or bribe their way north also had some experience working in a city. In certain respects, then the transition from dock worker in Richmond to dock worker in Boston was not a difficult one. Same could be said for the jobs of gardeners and porters. However, fugitives skilled in plantation work, blacksmiths, coopers, carpenters, rarely found the same jobs in Boston, nor did formerly enslaved hostlers, carriage drivers, or teamsters always secured employment working with horses. Upon his arrival in Boston, Peter Randolph, who had been a blacksmith, became a janitor and a tender. An unknown number of fugitives filled the ranks of dock workers and waiters in Boston. Harvey Parker, proprietor of his eponymous restaurant in Cellar on Court Square, offered his downtown clientele breakfast, dinners, and suppers at all hours of the day and evening. Two waiters targeted by federal marshals soon after the passage of the Fugitive Slave Act were serving customers at Parker's. Formerly enslaved house servants might work at the elaborate banquets sponsored by fraternal groups and city authorities. The largest hotel dining rooms seated up to 200 guests at a time and catered to tourists who expected black men to serve them their gin slings and mint juleps as well as their food. So you can have a skilled work job and then come and have to do service labor or hard labor. Well, it looked like all we did was hard labor, so because even if you were a blacksmith, that's very hard labor. The siblings, Harriet and John S. Jacobs, had to make a living while keeping an eye out for their owner and his agent. Abandoning the lecture circuit after canvassing upstate New York in the late 1840s, John moved to Rochester where he worked on the North Star and opened his own oyster restaurant. When the venture failed, he and his sister went back to New York City, but before long he was on his way to the West Coast. Meanwhile, Harriet spent her days anxiously scanning the newspapers to see which white Southerners had taken up residence in local hotels. In June of 1851, John was working in California, prospecting for gold, but according to Harriet, by October he came out poorer than when he went in. Despite moving from the mines, to the dry from the to the dry diggings, riverbeds of gravel. The end of 1852 found him once again in dire financial straits. He took off for Australia where gold had been discovered the year before. William Cooper Nell wrote that he hoped John would be lucky in Australia. How richly he deserved he deserves success. So you see unstable work, blacks looking for work, scrambling around, always having to run, run here, run there. Nothing's changed. We're still trying to run to this place, run to that place, run where we can buy a more affordable home, run where the city's not so rough, run when to where there's a slower pace. But it's usually economic because when we're running down south, it used to be the case you can get more for less as far as homes. In the last few years, I've been to Columbia, South Carolina. Their prices are off the charts, and their minimum wage is still $7. So it's like my sister down there says, where are these people getting this money to rent these apartments? Because apartments is like, it's not New York prices, but it's like $1,700 a one bedroom in Columbia. So it's rough. And that minimum wage is very low. But I suspect this is the children and grandchildren of slave money. Also, people coming from the North and coming from the Midwest. So they're driving up the prices for native black South Carolinians. Harriet had her own struggles as a servant, wholly relying on the well-to-do Nathaniel Parker Willis and his wife, Cornelia. In the 1840s, Jacobs had worked in Boston as a seamstress. Now, as the nanny for the Willis's children, she accompanied the family as they moved back and forth between New York and New Bedford, Cornelia's childhood home. Jacobs missed her own son and daughter, who were in the care of others, and she could not keep them at the Willis's. She resented that Cornelia showed no interest in either of them, their current whereabouts, or even their scandalous origins. They were the children of a white man. When her daughter, Louisa, turned 17 and began to make her own way in the world, Harriet noted that the life of a servant was hard and demeaning. Louisa would not be happy to live that way. She wants to seek her own livelihood, where she thinks she can be most useful. The runaway Mary Walker was similarly distressed that her white employers failed to appreciate the heartache she felt at leaving her children behind. In 1850, with the help of acquaintances, the 32-year-old Walker had managed to escape from Philadelphia, where her owner had traveled with her from North Carolina. She eventually found refuge with a white clergyman, Peter Leslie, and his wife, Susan, in Milton, Massachusetts. A Philadelphia relative and of the Leslies assured them of Walker all she asks is work, and this she is willing to perform cheerfully. Though she was a skilled seamstress specializing in shirts, Mary Walker took on a peripatetic life as a housekeeper. Yeah, I don't understand why writers write like this. I guess they're writing for other academics, but the rest of this book is very plain, and then she throws in these words. I never do that. I always try to break the word down to the most common thing. Racked with guilt about her own enslaved offspring, she balked at situations that required her to care for children. She explained to Susan Leslie, Miss L., it is not life I am fit for. I don't want to be with children. It is always reminding me of my own, and what shall I do? Mary's refusal to serve as nanny or governess made her difficult to place in a white family, despite the concern of sympathetic benefactors. It was the woman who often faced challenges in adapting to new ways of work. Bethany Vinnie's sense of dislocation was not usually among Southern women recently arrived in the North. She had been purchased by an anti slavery man in Virginia who had sent her and her son to live in Providence, Rhode Island, beyond the reach of the overseer, the jailer, and the auctioneer. Still, she wrote later, I had left behind me everyone I had ever known. She was, she thought, a stranger in a strange land, and it was no wonder, perhaps, that a dreadful loneliness and homesickness came over her. Adding to her misery was the kitchen of her new employer, for it contained all sorts of Yankee inventions and improvements to make work easy and pleasant. There were dishes and pans of every description, clean and distinct cloths for all purposes, brushes and brooms for different uses. While she yearned for her own people back in Virginia, she wrote, never could I forget to be grateful to my escape from a system under which I had suffered so much. So we'll end it there, working our way through the book. If this is behind the paywall, thank you for your support. I need it. If it's not, you should go behind the paywall so you get everything. Until next time, I hope that you can be safe. And remember, use this information in your life. Use it.